Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Coffee and Open Source, a place to meet some new friends, have some great conversations, and maybe learn something on the way. I'm your host, Isaac Levin. If you're enjoying the conversations here, be sure to like, subscribe, follow wherever you're watching or listening. Also, if you or anybody you know would like to come on and have a conversation with me, be sure to find me on social media. Best way to do that is isaac.r.levin.com, and you'll find all the places that I'm at, because I'm in way too many places. So with that out of the way, I'm looking forward to this. We're catching up. This is somebody that I've met a few times, and every time I think of them, I think about it like the very interesting situation they were put into. It was a work onboarding thing. We might talk about that. But I wanted to also talk with them about what they've been doing and all of the interesting things in tech that they've been observing. So my guest today is Sydnee Mayer. Sydney, do you want to say hello and introduce yourself?
Yeah, great to see you again, Isaac. I know we have a long history when you go back to
Well,
it.
it's a long history, but not. It's a long history in a short time frame.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I'm Sydnee Mayers. I currently lead AI product at Cribl. Have worked a few other places in tech, but generally spending a lot of time on AI things on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, and I think we're going to talk about AI things, but I'd like to get started with how you got started. So when do you recall technology being a thing for you?
Yeah, so I'm actually an engineer by trade. That's what I studied in school. That's what I always imagined I would be. I did not expect to be someone who was in tech. I wasn't that interested in tech related things. Like I wasn't one of those kids who was like, I'm in STEM club or or
Sure.
whatnot. That just wasn't in my ecosystem. Probably also the time I was a kid. But I found that towards the middle of college, I started to realize like I am kind of interested in these computer science classes. I did love learning about some of the more, we'll say, hands-on technical aspects of being an engineer. I was a mechanical engineer. And so there was always this like back of my mind, maybe that's something I should consider. Maybe that's something I should be interested in. The world at that time, like cloud had been around for some time, but it was starting to get really good
Sure.
traction. People were starting to really get into it. You were seeing big names. And so I had this concept of like, what is this cloud thing? Like, I want to
Mm,
go learn about what cloud is because I'm not really sure what that means. When you dive into the world of data centers and other things, it's a whole different story than
sure.
cloud in the way that it's pitched. But it was really like those last 2 years of college where I started to get interested. I got really lucky. Microsoft recruited me, which is a pretty unusual situation. I think if
Yeah,
you're to ask people today, that basically does not happen. But at the time, the recruiting style used to be they would go to like, I don't know, 25, 30 universities, and they pretty much always picked everyone from those universities. And I know because everyone I started with at Microsoft came from one of those 30
sure.
universities. And they kind of picked like students out of the resume book. So as long as you had your resume in the career resume book for your campus, they would come, they would look through, and then they sent me an email. And I was like, this is absolutely rude. I'm a senior. I'm killing myself to try and get a job. I'm applying to all kinds of places. And now I'm getting this spam email from Microsoft. Like, that's so messed up. So I almost didn't answer it because I was like, this is fake. And I'm pissed that this is happening to me. And for whatever reason, I was like, let me just, typical security stuff. Let me check the URL
Yeah,
or
sure.
the domain the person is emailing from. And I was like, maybe this is legit. I replied. I ended up doing an interview on campus, and then the rest was history. That was back in the day when they used to do like in-person interviews. So I
Sure.
went to the Dallas office, I want to say, for like 4 interviews back to back, big blowout day. Within a week, I got an offer, and I was like, I think this is for me. I know this isn't mechanical engineering related, but I think I should just go for it. And the rest is kind of history from there.
I mean, the fact that you heard back so quickly is always interesting because I've met people that their hiring process, and this isn't a Microsoft issue, but this is a tech issue at large. Sometimes it takes a long
Yeah.
time, right? Because they have a lot of candidates and they got to arrange stuff. So I mean, I don't know if your ego can take this, but like maybe you're good at what you do, and maybe they recognize that there's potential there, and after that, they're like, let's just get this person a job offer so they don't get snatched up by somebody else.
Maybe I didn't think that at the time.
Well, yeah, sure,
I don't
sure.
know if I conceptualize it that way today, but yeah, you're right. I mean, realistically, right? Like if you think about the recruiting structure at a lot of these places, they have thousands of people. Even when we were there and I was hiring for people, I'd put up a rec and it would be like 1,000 people within 8 hours.
Oh
It
yeah,
was crazy. It's
yeah,
still crazy, right? So it is kind of unreal to be able to break the numbers because statistically the odds are not in your favor
sure,
whatsoever.
sure. Yeah, no, I very much agree. Like it, and I think it's gotten a little bit, it's, and this isn't to knock like LinkedIn or other tools that like kind of amplify jobs, but whenever you have a place that you can go and you can see jobs for like 40 different companies at once catered to your particular criteria, like applications for those jobs are going to skyrocket. And I've hired people, like I know hiring managers, and they very much tell me like, if you don't know me or know somebody that knows me, like you have to be like very exceptional just to get past like the rev or resume like culling process.
Yep.
And it's a bit disappointing because like we live in this society where the expectation is like, oh, you work hard, you do a good thing, and like things will good thing happen to you. But as you find out, and I don't know if it's like this in all industries, but in tech is very much who you know, right? And when you're getting started, you don't know anybody.
Yeah, that's true. You don't. And you also don't really have anything to offer, right? So you
Sure.
can't even
Yeah.
stand out to be exceptional. You're 100% a potential player, as people like to call it, a personality hire,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you are basically a personality hire at that point.
So you had like a mechanical engineering background. So what are some of the things that you know when you think about like what you were when you were focusing in that sort of curriculum in school? Are there some, I guess the best way to phrase it, there's some like similar traits that you kind of accomplish, like is it the analytical, the problem solving piece that really resonated for you to get into tech? Like what are some of the things that I guess you took from your mechanical engineering background or interest initially and kind of brought that into tech?
Yeah, I think there's kind of two big things that I use pretty much day to day for my mechanical engineering degree, even now, which I don't think I would have said when I was first graduating. The first is structured problem solving. You get really, really good at being able to take a problem, hairy or otherwise, and break it down into the parts that you need to go tackle. I think that's great when you're working a little bit more hands-on as like a developer, an architect, folks who really need to be able to take quote unquote an epic and break it down into stories and tackle those one by one. The other aspect that surprises me more on a day to day is being able to decipher what's important and what's not important and how to
Yeah.
value importance of different parts of the problem. And so, like, I had a professor in college. He's notorious for this. He uses the craziest exam questions. He would be, he taught like dynamics, which is basically like different relative motion, like being able to
Sure.
calculate relative
Sure.
motion
Sure.
between objects. So he would have stuff like, you're sitting inside of a bucket truck, and the bucket truck has an arm, and then inside the arm, inside the bucket, there's like a different object, and that object is spinning, and you're spinning in a different direction with the arm, and then you sitting in your seat are stationary. Like, how do you measure the relative distance and motion of those objects to you and then from each other? And he was like the most ridiculous things that I've ever heard. And he would throw a ton of useless information in there because he was trying to teach the skill of like being able
Yeah.
to distill what's important to this problem. And so, man, that man put me through hell. But I eventually was able to figure out like, how do you get that insight, that really good focus of what's important, what's not important. As a PM, I feel like I spend the majority of my day thinking about this. What's important, what's not important? What can I let go of for now and approach later? What's something we shouldn't consider at all? But it's all rooted in the same kind of concept. Like, what's the outcome I want to drive? What am
Yeah.
I looking to achieve? And I think that's something that like, I use pretty much every day in almost every conversation related to product that I would not have expected if you had asked me when I first graduated, like, what things from mechanical engineering are you going to use for the
Sure.
rest of your career?
Yeah, the example that you gave, it like reminds me of, and I never got to experience this, so I kind of have a little bit of FOMO where like the impossible like tech questions where it's like,
Yeah.
oh, you're filling a car full of ping pong balls, like how would you calculate like how many ping pong, like whatever, right? Like that kind of question that you formulated to me, it sounds very much like that, but it's like with a little bit of hint of like practical reality, right? Because I
Yeah.
imagine there are people that like do work in situations where they have to kind of account for like weird sort of variables. And your point that you made about like sometimes there's so much noise around us that like you only care about two data points, but you're getting like 70. And like there is a very specific skill set in being able to decipher like what are the pieces of information that I need from this particular set of data, um, and where can I go with it? Like I see this, we see this a lot in tech where, you know, people will say, okay, let's look at some data, but you only really care about 2 data points. Like, and especially in, not to knock any big cloud provider hyperscaler, but like when you look at like data like coming out of any sort of cloud system, there's so much information and you don't really care about 2 things, right? And sometimes it's really, really hard to decipher, like, okay, well, do I need something from this thing or do I need something from this thing, and then join it together? And it's like, that is a skill set that I think that a lot of people don't really figure out they have until they're
Yep.
given the opportunity to really exert it.
100%. 100%. And I think some of that is like creating a culture of being able to try those things and have some room to fail, because man, like you're going to fail probably more times than you win, at least in the beginning, where you're just going to say like, well, I think the important thing, good example, if I'm running an AKS cluster, I think the thing I should know is utilization, or I think the thing
Sure.
I should know is X, right? And then you're going to realize like that matters not at all because of the way that you're running it or the way that
Yeah.
you've set up your orchestration. Like all of that is going to be irrelevant, right? You don't really have that opportunity until you can go deploy it, look at it, and understand like, okay, I totally misjudged this. It's not about, utilization of the entire system. It's just individual pods. And if I run multiple pods on one device, that's different than running one pod, right? Like
Mhm.
those are the things that you will learn if you can spend time with it. Some environments are not conducive to that. And they don't have that like a, you know, FAFO culture, we'll say,
Yeah.
and see how it goes and be able to really get hands on, because you're really not going to be able to assess just from the theoretical and a lot of things. And for a lot of people, if they're not given that opportunity, they'll never have a chance to even see if that's a skill set they have the aptitude for, let alone can actually do.
Yeah, I've had this conversation a few times with people, and I've also, like, outside of tech, I've had this conversation about, there are some principles in my opinion that people should be educated on fairly early on in their process. Like, outside of tech, like I've always said, I think that we really started to fail in our education system when we started to kind of move away from, like, what are the everyday responsibilities of a human being. Like, I was
Yep.
talking to my kid about like balancing a checkbook, right? Like, that's something that as an adult I don't really do, but like the understanding of like money in, money out is very, very important. Or like how to file taxes or whatever, right? And that used to be like a job that you took in high school. Like, you would take like whatever, I can't remember what the classic home economics, I think is what it was called at my
Yep.
school, right? You would take something like that and you would learn how to do like basic things in order to become an adult, and we've lost that. And I think in similar, like in tech and other sort of technical fields, there are some things that we're just not teaching people. It's like very much on the job training. And I think my
Yep.
question to you is, you know, is there space for that sort of learning? And at what level of somebody's life should that information be given to them?
Yeah, you're totally right. Is there space for that learning? Yes. When it should be given to them, I personally think as soon as possible. Like the reality is, every kid, whether you're an iPad kid or not, is exposed to technology on a day-to-day basis, right? And whether that's their iPad or parents' phone or what have you, I think a lot of why we have this sentiment among parents and families of like, I can't give my kid a cell phone until this age.
Sure.
I
Yeah.
guarantee you they'll find some way around it, right? Like kids are crafty. I was a kid at one point, you were a kid at one point. You know the way to get around things, even as a parent, but you still hope that they're not going to do that. I think the sooner that we can introduce not just how to use technology, but how to use it safely, responsibly, make judgment calls, the better. And starting that sooner in a kid's life, I think is a lot easier. What I find now for a lot of kids, we've replaced stuff like home economics with STEM club and
Mm,
robotics and all of
sure.
these really advanced concepts. I don't have anything wrong with those, but we can't prioritize those things over teaching kids the basic, like, how do you apply for a credit card? What is credit?
Oh,
How do you buy
yeah.
a house?
Yeah.
Like, basic things like that. Because I think at the end of the day, there's actually more intersection between those concepts than we probably openly talk about. Like when I think about credit, it's not just applying for the credit, it's monitoring the credit. So
Yeah.
what kind of tools can you use to monitor credit? Like Credit Karma, right? Like being able to make those associations for kids as soon as possible, to me, I think is really impactful. I think it also gives them a sense of like when I go into the workforce, whether that's immediately after secondary school or after college or after advanced degrees, or, whenever folks want to kind of head into that, technology is pretty much involved in every single job to varying
Sure. Sure.
degrees. So if we don't give them those skills, we're essentially not setting them up for success. And I don't think that's doing anyone any benefit. I also think, to finish this one out, Continuous learning is super important. I know Microsoft loves to use the cheesy growth mindset,
Sure. Yeah.
but I actually feel like growth mindset from a conceptual perspective, although I don't like using that term, is something that a person learns as like the sooner they learn it, the more natural it becomes.
Yeah.
So having a hunger for knowledge, having a hunger for learning, having a hunger to understand, I think is an incredibly valuable skill set. Our education system does not give kids a hunger. It can be a bit punitive, and so I think for a lot of kids, they just shy away from the way that we teach kids how to learn in traditional education systems. But the more that they can kind of learn, like, I'm actually interested in trying something new, learning something new, and not being afraid of, like, I didn't do it right the first time. Man, if someone had taught me that lesson earlier in my life, I feel like I'd have a completely different trajectory and a lot less pain I would have spent trying to hold myself to a standard of not really understanding why I couldn't do something the first time.
Oh, I 100% agree. What I'm hearing from you is like, every kid's 10th birthday, they get their own Kubernetes cluster, right? Yeah.
Like, why not? A good
Yeah.
Azure license never killed
Yeah.
anyone.
I mean, so it's funny that you were talking about like like managing credit and understanding credit. Like there are some tools out there. Like we got our kids like green dot cards, and
Mm,
what green dot cards basically are, they're like kids investing accounts. So like a kid can like get an allowance, and then they can take that money and they can actually invest it. So like my kid owns stocks in some companies, and as a part of that, like they learn, you know, why the stock goes up, why the stock goes down. They get a little bit of information about earnings. Like if they have a stock that has dividends, they learn a little about dividends. And it's really funny because to my kid, it's just like, oh, let me check. Oh, my Walmart stock is up 5 cents or whatever it is. But what they really are learning is like, it doesn't mean that like, oh, people are buying more things from Walmart. It's that the value of Walmart is changing over time based on a bunch of different things. And I think that's very, very helpful. But I think the problem with that is that my wife and I wouldn't have realized that was a thing unless we saw it somewhere.
yeah.
Because, we live in this world where everything is accessible to us, but there's also, like, to go back to your point about noise, there's so much noise. Like, I could very much, be the parent that, like, like you're saying, like, my kid just gets an iPad when they get home and then they go to bed and I don't talk to them, right? Like, and
Yeah.
there are some parents that do that, and good, bad, or indifferent, that's what they decide to do. But like you have to, there's a ton of work that needs to get done around like getting good information to people in very accessible ways. But instead, what I'm seeing is that no, 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 no. You're gonna get the information that we think is good for you everywhere,
Yeah.
and that's capitalism. But that's a different conversation. I think what's fascinating to me about, and we'll circle this back to like tech, is that we're kind of like, and we were talking about this before we got started, how tech is like the only kind of type of job that things change constantly and we're just okay with it. And I think what's fascinating to me about that, as I was, as we were talking about this, is not only are we okay with it, but like we also kind of like need it to an extent. Like
Yep.
everybody's kind of worked a job where they're kind of bored, and you kind of, we either look for new jobs or we try to figure out a way to make our current job not boring. I can't think of any other job types or industries out there where people are like they're bored in their job and the first thing they do is like try to find another job.
Yeah. You're 100% right. We're such gluttons for this. Like, that is the classic. I told you before we got on the stream, like, someone gave me the advice to interview every 6 months. When I tell my friends I interview every 6 months just to keep the practice of interviewing, they're always like, "What the hell? Like,
Yeah.
are you crazy? Who interviews every 6 months? Like, you're not even going to accept the job." I'm like, "Yeah, no. I just want to make sure that I keep in practice, that I understand what's happening, that I like remain sharp and know my value and all those things. Those are great things to have." But literally no other person I know does that,
Yeah.
other than other people in tech. I know that for sure. But that's not normal in many ways. That's kind of this like weird paradigm we've set up.
Yeah, it's also funny, like you have conversations with the recruiter, right? And the recruiter's like, "Oh, so why are you looking for work right now?" And you're like, "Well, I'm not really looking." And they're just fine with that response. That's what's always funny to me, where it's like, "Okay, so tell me why you're interested." I'm like, "Well, I'm just looking." Because something interesting might come up. I might have a great conversation with the hiring manager. I might like the type of work, and I'm just looking. I'm happy what I'm doing, or whatever. But I'm looking. I'm not. And I can only imagine how irritating it would be to be a recruiter in tech, where it's like a lot of people are just kind of complacent about like excitement around things. Like,
Yep.
are you liking the work that you're doing right now? Yeah, I'm doing. Like, yeah. So why are you looking for work? Gotta stay sharp. It's just, you know. And I had a hiring manager tell me, um, because there was a job, that I was interested in, and this is like right after I got ripped from AWS, and I was like, "Oh, I'm interested about the job." He's like, "I would love to have you on this job, but HR will not let me interview you." And I asked them, "Oh, why is that?" And they said, "Because HR sees you as a flight risk." And I'm like, "Okay, what does that mean?" "Well, you've worked for more than 2 companies in the last 3 years." And I'm like, "Well, I got fired from one of them just now, like laid off, fired, whatever you want to call it, right? I got riffed."
Yeah.
And he's like, "It doesn't matter. That's our policy." And in my head, I was like, that seems like a very arcane policy. But it goes back to what we were saying earlier. Like, people are always interviewing in tech, so people are more likely to switch jobs every 18 months to 3 years, right?
Yep. 100%. It was really common at Microsoft, like especially for the companies that are somewhat co-located, right? Amazon and Microsoft both being in the Seattle area, you see a lot of transfer there. Google has a presence there, so you see folks jump between those. I don't think anyone ever blinked if someone was like, "Yeah, I left the job after 6 months."
Yeah.
I don't remember a single person reacting to that ever. And I mean, like, even for jobs that I was interviewing for within Microsoft, there was no like you have to be in your job for a year or
Yeah.
any of that. There was never any of those stipulations, which I always appreciated because the reality is the environment we've set up in tech is such that we push people to have this growth mindset. We push people to always be looking for the next thing, the next promotion, the next cool tech to work on. The thing now is working in AI. I get people ask me constantly, like, do you just have job offers coming up the wazoo because you work in AI? I'm like, maybe, but I don't check. Like, I'm not like actively being like, let me check what offers I got in my inbox that day, right? But it's because that's the environment that's curated and often rewarded, right? Like someone who's
Yeah.
constantly looking for something new, someone who is like, I got an offer from somewhere else. Are you going to match it or I'm out? Right. Like that's just such a common paradigm. I don't know anyone who works in tech that blinks at those things. Loyalty is not the only loyalty I think tech has is to the industry in that
Yeah.
people feel that they need to stay in tech, but not necessarily for any specific company.
It's even like, it's even not even tech, right? Like, I was having this conversation specifically with a work colleague, and there's like two levels of tech. There's like, oh, I'm a developer and I work maybe at an insurance company or I work in banking or whatever. And then I
Sure.
work at big tech, where my job is like like I build things for other developers. I build developer tools, I build developer clouds, whatever, right? And the differentiators between the like somebody asked like what's the difference? I'm like, okay, well, one, you're building something that makes money that goes directly to like that you're building something that eventually go directly to a consumer. In big tech, typically, you're building something that goes directly to another business.
Yep.
And because of that dichotomy, there's all of this hand waving around like where like at what point does it actually get in front of a real person's face that actually like because you're selling use AKS whatever you're selling AKS to a customer, they're building an app that's in AKS, and then eventually maybe that app runs in a thermostat that some person has installed in their house,
Yep.
right? Like there's just so many turtles that we need to navigate to like get to where do you actually build something that actually touches a person, and you don't really see that. You only see that in big tech, right?
Yep. 100%. Yeah, and it is a bit how do you call it? Like that separation from the user, like real person on the other
Yeah.
side, I think can be like a very specific psyche shift that I don't know if everyone has had the experience of feeling. You can get very disconnected from what happens in the real world because you're like, well, I think people want this. I think this API should look this way. I think my data plane should operate this way. And it's very easy to be like, I think, because you don't actually have to face people
Sure.
when
Sure.
something goes wrong or when something breaks. I will say as a PM, that's one of the aspects that I both love and hate. You are often the person who has to go face when something has hit the fan and you're
Yeah.
like, Mr. Mrs. Customer, I'm so sorry that this hit the fan. What can I do to make it better, right? Like you play a lot of that role, so you do have to be the face, and I think that helps for me humanize a lot of the work that I do. But you can also very much be one of those PMs who disconnects themselves and doesn't talk to customers
Yeah.
and just kind of like let that be a thing on the side.
Yeah, I mean, what I thought was always fascinating whenever I talk to people that are in product is like the whole user research piece of it, where it's like, you know, very much like you think of user research, like, okay, we're gonna bring you in and you're all gonna taste like a beverage and tell me which beverage tastes the best, right? But like
Yeah.
the software equivalent of that, which is very funny to me, where it's like, oh, we're gonna have you look at two different screens and navigate this thing and tell me which one likes, like that to me is very fascinating because I think we're all very guilty of of having subjectivity as to like what is good and what is not good. And in
Yep.
tech, like I've seen so many like bad UIs that I immediately am like, okay, enough of these UIs that are bad look very similar. So maybe I just have like a very subjective taste of what bad UI is because other people might love it. And I think that's one thing that's very interesting about like tech specifically in this regard because you can send two people down the same path of anything. Like whether they're navigating an app or they're building an app, and they're going to take multiple forks, and then eventually they might come at the same outcome, but they went there two complete separate ways. And one of the things that I find fascinating about that is that now, because of AI, we're all kind of being funneled like very, very smallly, like the same kind of funnel. But like inside that funnel, there's a bunch of forks, right?
Yep.
Because as we know, not these LLMs are non-deterministic, so you're never going to get the same response every single time from them. So I guess that whole rant is kind of to ask this question as to how do we know what's when something is and is not good anymore, or is it still
Yeah.
subjective? Just now, instead of like a person having subjective, it's like a person making a decision based on, some token based retrieval of context, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting. That's a really tough thing to answer. And shout out to user research. We have a user researcher at Cribl. Her name is Anna. She's fantastic. I rely so heavily on user research. Like
Yeah.
I feel like, some PMs have never spoken to a researcher. I'm like, no, I'm every day with our researcher. She knows me, I know her, so shout out to her. I think you make a really good point on how do you make those judgment calls and how do we know what's right or wrong? How do we make these subjective? What is still subjective at the end of the day? I think that's important to note. Like you can use ChatGPT, you can use Claude, you can use whatever you want to help you in your decision making process, but it's still going to be subjective. And that's the nature of it. And whether that's subjective with 10 sources of data to pick from or subjective with your one Google search where you only clicked on one link,
Yeah.
it's subjective regardless. And I think it's important for us to be able to understand what about this situation is different? Why is it any more or less subjective if I use Claude or ChatGPT? The part that stands out to me working with people on AI and just in general, like being in these communities where people talk about AI, people don't put in the effort to think about stuff. They're like, chat gives it to me. Like
Mm,
I can't even tell you how many times I've heard that exact same phrase. And I'm like, well, tell me what chat gave you. I'm
yeah.
curious. Like, what did chat give you, right? Like, where is the thought process behind it? And I think we have to be really conscientious about anything that we're using with AI, but also other forms of technology. I should be thinking about it. I should use that data. Going back to our first conversation point, I need to be able to distill what's important, right? Like, if chat gave you information, great. What it can do really well is coalesce way more information than I can get as an individual in the same amount of time. I'm not going to be able to search 10 links, I'm not going to be able to distill and get summaries. But if something sounds off to me, that would be the sign to me to like go look deeper, go have another like thought about it, maybe step away. I can't tell you how many people come back and they're like, well, chat told me this. I'm like, great. What are you going to do with that? What does that mean? Tell me how you interpreted it. There's just a very low, like, interest in doing that. And I think that to me is the part that concerns me more than anything else. It's still a subjective choice. It's still a subjective decision. You may have more data points than you had before, but you can't really be asleep at the wheel either.
Yeah.
You still have to make that decision. You still have to be thinking about those things, even if what ChatGPT or Claude or some of these other tools can do for you is give more information than you had access to before and maybe help you understand and synthesize that information better.
Yeah, you said something that really resonated with me about like, chat just told me, right? Because there was an MIT study that was done over the summer where it basically like monitored brain activity of people that are given a task and then they were told basically do the same task using like ChatGPT more or less. And this isn't a knock on ChatGPT specifically. This is just a knock on whatever. Um, and the study found basically that people had less brain activity when they were using like an LLM to to get their answer to their question, which I don't think that I don't directly correlate that to like that's a bad thing, but I do think that there's a bit of reasoning that falls by the wayside when you're like, because let's be real, the responses that you get from these tools are very confident, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and because of that, like there's a whole sort of like discussion about like, are these things like should we be like, anthropomorphize these things? Should we be kind of treating them like other people and humans when they're not? They're not even like, they don't have intellect, they don't have cognition, they don't have all these things. But they talk but they the way that they respond to you is very conversational, intentionally, right? And
Yep.
I've always thought it was very, very fascinating when ChatGPT first came out, how confident it was giving you wrong answers that like you knew specifically were wrong, and then you still see this, you correct it, and it's like, I see what the issue is, I'm so sorry, blah blah blah, right? And and then you're kind of forced to have this conversation with this thing like it's a human, but it's not. And then you hear from like, OpenAI that says they burn like millions of dollars a month because people are polite to the AI, right? Um,
Yep.
so I'd love to kind of, what are you thinking around, are we going too far down the science fiction aspect of this stuff where we want, like, the only way that we really trust it is we treat it like as a somewhat equal? Are we doing ourselves the disservice by assuming these things are equal to us?
100%. Maybe this is controversial as an AI technologist, but there are some things that I don't think AI should be involved in. Erotica is one of them. Like, what
Sure.
do we mean this whole concept of erotica and
Yeah.
erotic conversations with AI models? To me, that is way too far. Not just a moral thing, like taking morals aside, that has so many ways that that can go wrong. That's also like when you think about other arguments people have made about how we're, way more impersonal than we were before COVID, and we don't like to connect with people in person, or things like the Gen Z stare, where like we just have these weird connection points that people make fun of. We're perpetuating that problem and making it much worse by allowing and condoning, not just allowing, but like condoning and encouraging these types of use cases
Yeah.
with AI.
Yeah.
When, to be honest, the harm is significantly higher than the help, and I will stand by that
I
100%, right?
mean,
Like, I'm not going to budge on that
I'm
one.
not gonna like I'm not gonna disagree at all, and I'm not gonna like go down the laundry list of like examples of this already being a thing. I think that all you
Yep.
have to do is do an internet search of like, are is ChatGPT bad or whatever, and you'll see all sorts of reasons as to why they could be problematic. I do think it is very fascinating to me, and this is more of a anthropological sociology conversation, that we have, like, to your point, the most isol I don't know, that's not a word, I can't pronounce it anyway. Like the biggest like isolating moment in human society ever, right? And then we follow it almost immediately with another thing that could generate more isolation. Because I mean,
Yep.
let's be real. Like, if I was 15 and I didn't have any friends in school and nobody liked me and my parents didn't really get me and I didn't have anybody to talk to, like, I could turn to these assistants. And maybe it's good, maybe it's bad. It's not my place to say, whatever. But I do think that there is some anxiety around, should these things act like humans, be treated like humans, or should they literally just like, I, instead of it being conversational, it's just kind of like a Wikipedia of sorts. You ask it a
Yep.
question, it gives you a very um, formal, non I'm losing words today. Basically, gives you a response to, like, immediately says like, this is a paper, not a person.
Yep. Yeah, so I think there are things, it's hard. I don't know if there's a perfect black and white to this one. I think there are certain things that we wouldn't be able to achieve without kind of the approach that LLMs take, which is being able to describe something without perfect precision and still arrive at an answer. Because I think that's the challenge that a lot of people face with searches. If I go on Google and I search for something, people have developed whole systems around how they search
Yes.
keywords and
Yeah.
structures, sentences, not sentences. There's a really nice way of being able to do that in just like a pure conversational interface that you can't really get with
Oh,
Google.
sure.
Yeah, and not Google specifically, but like any sort of search engine. So do you think there's some aspects where we have to kind of leave the dial a little bit open to be able to capture those use cases? A really common one, in-car assistance, right? Like
Sure.
if you don't use the exact word that it was trained on, it's not going to understand that like what you want or what you're looking for. And man, nothing pisses me off more on the road than when I like ask an in-car assistant to do something and it like does not understand me. And that's dangerous, right? Like I
Yeah.
could totally get into an accident trying to mess around with that. With that said, I do think there is something to be said for how far do we allow that to go. I think when we get to a point where people prefer that over human interaction
Yeah.
or prefer that over even chatting with someone over social media, that's a different dynamic. It's still another human being on the end. They still have feelings, they still have thoughts. Controversial topic, but like they have a concept of shame. They have a concept
Sure.
of
Well,
somewhat right and wrong.
sometimes.
So,
I don't know
sometimes,
how long you've been on the
maybe.
internet, right? Like there are some people that I think they glorify the fact they have no shame. Anyway, I interrupted you. Keep going.
Nope, totally, totally. You're right. Maybe they have a concept of shame or have a better chance. LLMs don't have a concept of shame, right? Like when I did an experiment, gosh, this is probably 2 years ago now, with ChatGPT, where it gave me a wrong answer and I just berated the hell out of it.
Hmm.
Like absolutely annihilated it. If I did that to another person, they would be crushed,
Sure.
right? Like
Sure.
if I was like, Isaac, lay into you, sure, maybe you put on a brave face for that moment, but later on, you're probably going to be thinking about it, at least to some degree, like, why did she act that way with me?
Yeah.
Chat was just like, yeah, yeah, you're right. No, I get it. Yeah, it has no feelings, right? It doesn't understand. It has no concept of those things. I don't think we should be putting people in a position where they're like, well, I really do prefer this non-human interaction over having interactions with other people. I also feel like we put them in really like exposed areas to be harmed by this
Sure.
technology. And I to put one last parallel on it, if we were having the same conversation about AKS, people would be like, no. Like, what do
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
mean
Yeah.
human AKS? That's weird as hell. What do you
Yeah.
mean
Yeah.
I'm adding a human element to this? This is a paradigm that we have introduced specifically with this technology that doesn't really exist in other places.
Yeah. And I mean, this is. I know this is we're in this point in time where we're seeing this huge shift in something that has typically been analog for a long, long time, and
Yep.
now it's almost 100% digital. Like I was having this conversation about like I haven't written a letter in God knows how long. Not because I don't talk to people, but because the need to write a letter is like very, very small. Basically, the only time you ever write a letter is like when the person that you're trying to get a hold of doesn't use technology in a particular way that you do, or
Yep.
it's like some bureaucratic checkbox for like, I don't know, insurance claim or whatever it is, right? And they just don't
Yep.
have some online system. So like, we're having, and then you see social media is kind of replacing like talking on the phone to people. Like, I mean, I don't talk on the phone hardly ever because why would I do that when I can send, why would I talk for 5 minutes when I can send 400 text messages?
Yep.
Right? It's like, and now we're at this place where instead, okay, so we've replaced a lot of analog systems. We've replaced like actually seeing somebody face to face and hearing their voice. And now we're synthesizing like their actual presence. And like your analogy of, or your example where you're saying like you're berating. I mean, honestly, like that sounded kind of fun. I'm not gonna lie. Like, so, and I don't know if you do this, but like if somebody sends me an email and I get like all heated, I'll respond to it, but then I'll leave it in unsent, right? And
Yep.
I'll just look at it like an hour later and be like, oh, I can't send an email like that. I'll get fired, right? Um, so I think that there is some value in being able to voice frustrations in a way that is compartmentalized to you. But again, like that is one small example. And there's probably a conversation like, Isaac, you shouldn't even be thinking like that, like whatever, right? Whatever. Anyway, I have therapy tomorrow. Um, the but I do think that it seems like the window of like how we interact with these things is closing, and there's like one way to interact with them.
Yep.
And I remember when I first showed ChatGPT or whatever to like some people, like when it first came out, it was out for like a week, and I was playing around with it. And I showed it to somebody. It was like during Christmas time, and some people were like, "Oh, that's cool." Some people were like, "Oh, that's gross," and then one person was like, "Oh," and then they own a recruiting business, and they literally changed like their entire business model around using ChatGPT to like do mails and all these sort of things. Like they used it for like a very good use case. But I always thought it was funny because like the amount of people that said cool and gross was split like exactly down the middle. And that's what I think is very fascinating about this is because you're either against it or you're for it 100%. And in tech, it seems like we're sort of hitting that shift as well right now. Where else I think consumers did it first, and now in tech
Yep.
we're like, all right, maybe this thing isn't the coolest thing ever.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think a lot of people have felt the pain of being tasked with this question of like, go use more AI and then failing.
Yeah.
And now that failure is starting to sting. And it makes sense that it would, because it really feels like detrimental when I thought I was going to make this thing, this was going to be the next $1 billion idea. This was going to be the next horizon. And the reality is like startups, if you think about how many companies actually become unicorns, how many companies actually make it off the
Yeah.
ground, it's a really small percentage. I think we're seeing a lot of the same thing here, right? The reality is like not every use case is a good use case. I brought up the erotica thing. There's also tons of other use cases that it's not built for and it's not going to succeed at. And so we do have to have this kind of reckoning within tech around what's a good use case, what's not a good use case. To reference MIT again, I think they did that study with the big headline of like 95% of AI use cases
Sure.
have
Yeah.
failed. Good on them for finding a really good headline. That is definitely
Yeah.
an eye
They
opener.
probably
I'm
use
sure
it. They probably use AI.
they probably did. Chat probably said that
Yeah.
one too.
Yes. Hey Gemini, give me 6 headlines that are literally gonna get to the top of Hacker News and get like whatever, right? I mean, it's not a bad idea.
It's not. And maybe, right? Like that's a use case when you have a really clear understanding of what's the outcome that I want. I want a wow factor, right? Doesn't necessarily need to be, it's not that it's not accurate. It's like the way that that information is portrayed in that headline is not necessarily how the information goes into the actual study when you read it. But we tend to focus a lot on that 95%. And we should, because that gives us a sense of what we did incorrectly, what things should not have been invested in, what things that we maybe needed to make tweaks. And there's like a learning and understanding cycle. I am actually more curious about the 5% that went well. Like,
Mm,
why did they go well? Were they pure brute force? Was there something really interesting that we did there? Was there something innovative? Did we learn how to apply it in a way that people were really interested in? Like, what's the answer to that 5%? I think that reckoning is starting to hit tech in a way that
yeah.
consumers are like, it didn't give me the right recipe or it didn't give me X,
Sure.
right? Like,
Sure.
we're only now starting to have that. But I think behind that, a lot of people didn't want to say it. I actually feel like we've known it for a while.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people didn't want to admit like this thing that we invested huge dollars into is not panning out. And it might not be panning out because it's not the right use case. It might also not be panning out because we didn't have the right people on it, which I think is
Yeah.
a whole other separate topic to go,
Sure. No, I
go
agree.
down.
And I wanted to kind of transition into a little bit of like, AI dooming to like AI goodness, right? And I think that let's be real. There you can call out like all sorts of problems that we have in this space around, productivity and usage and ethics. But I do think, and this isn't a spicy take, but there are some things that AI is just better at than we are. And one of the things that I always think about, so for what it's worth, some people know this about me. Like I'm a huge baseball fan. Like I love baseball. I'm a bit of a nerd. Like and I care about statistics and all of that. And one of the things that um, I've always been fascinated with is the statistics around baseball, but like how hard it is to like quantify 100 plus years of a sport and like trying to figure out statistics. So I'm like building a tool actively right now that um like it does basically it looks at trends in baseball across 5 year, 10 year, 15 year periods. And I'm trying to like gather insights of like what was successful in baseball over a 5 year trend, whatever, right? And I'm using like AI to do that a little bit. And yeah, it's a lot of it is like passing data into LLM with like some very interesting prompts. But like I think that computing like tons of data is like literally like the story for LLMs. And yes, we've had this before. Like there's like proper machine learning where it's like gather insights on your data and things like that. But I for whatever and maybe it's just the conversational piece of it, like it seems to me like doing some of these tasks using RAG, using LLMs, they're successfully, I guess, less barrier to entry than they were with like I guess machine learning from 5, 10, 15, 50 years ago.
Yep. 100%. I think that's actually the thing that ChatGPT brought to market. And if I were OpenAI, the thing I would be proudest of is exposing the world to AI in a way they've never seen before. I think if you ask people what AI was, they might tell you Watson from IBM, right?
Sure,
Like
of
that's
course, yes. That's
what
well,
people
that's
know,
that's
right?
what that's what society has taught us, right? Like
Right.
every dystopian, futuristic sort of show or TV has some robot that talks to you and like can have a conversation and whatever. Completely
Yeah.
side tangent. There's this show on Apple TV, Murderbot. I don't know if you've seen Murderbot.
No, no.
It's really good. They're like 30-minute episodes. It's about basically an AI that has like a human skin, and it's played by Alexander Skarsgård. Like it's a good show, but like it's just because there's this weird dilemma because people are interacting with it like it's a human when it's not a human, and it
Yep.
recognizes that it's not a human, and then it tries to like build like some sense of like self. Anyway, watch that show if anybody's interested in like that sort of way of thinking about it. I interrupted you. Keep going.
No, I was just gonna say, I think that is the thing that that ChatGPT and just OpenAI in general has exposed in a way we've never been able to capture people before on technical, generally pretty technical topics. It's democratized. It has a super low barrier to entry. Maybe we need to increase the barrier a little bit, but that's a whole other thing. But it just changed the way that people thought about this concept, this 2001 Space Odyssey HAL vision that they
Yeah.
had. Most people, that's what they think of, these crazy scenarios, or Watson on Jeopardy. People now think of it as ChatGPT and a thing that they can use, an assistant, a tool. I think the downside to that a little bit is that people have anthropomorphized it because I think that's what makes sense to them in a
Sure.
lot of ways.
Yeah.
Much like you're talking about with the show, right? Like if something looks like a human being, I'm going to talk to it like it's a human being. If I look at a dog, I'm probably going to talk to the dog how I talk to a dog.
Yeah.
And I think we have treated it more like a person rather than a tool, in the
Mm.
same way that I might use a tool to send me an email or say, hey Siri, set a 5-minute reminder. Like people don't interact with Siri the way that they interact with ChatGPT.
No.
And a lot
No,
of
they
it
don't.
is just Siri may not be as good, but outside of that, that's
Well,
just not the paradigm we set up.
yeah. Whether Siri is good or not at this moment doesn't matter because Siri has not been as good for a longer amount of time. So like this is something too that I see. Like if there's like if there's backstory to the conversation, like people have like that history, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. With this stuff, there's like no history. It literally
Yep.
like one day a website with a chatbot showed up, and it's like put in your question and get an answer. And like we didn't have like the permutations of like what it looked like before. We didn't experience like it asking for a taco recipe and it showed you how to like make a lasagna. Like we didn't see any of that. We just saw something
Yeah.
like close to very accurate, and it was mildly terrifying, right? And even though like I love using this example, like you ask it for a taco recipe, the taco recipe that it gives you is a taco recipe that has never existed in humanity ever, because it like yes it could be bite for bite, but it's not taking it from anywhere. Like it is
Yep.
creating 100% original content every single time. It's just using other content as kind of a sourcing mechanism. And when I said that to somebody, they looked at me like I was absolutely crazy, because I'm like, you have to understand these things don't know anything. And but like to circle back to like one of the things I find interesting about AI, like here's an example. Like, we were talking a little bit earlier about, looking at data and trying to figure out data. Like being able to use like some form of like human readable conversation. It's like, hey, tell me all the times an exception happened in this particular Kubernetes cluster and give me the timestamps and also tell me what the trace route was for like where it came from. Like that is like being able to type that in and get an answer is literally like the golden ticket, right?
100%, 100%. Because if not, you need to know like 7 query languages and
Yes.
all the commands and every possible thing. And if you type something wrong, you're screwed. Like all of that was just inaccessible, right? Like unless you know those things or unless you're willing to invest the time to get there, it's not possible. To the average person, they would never know, right? Like they're not going to know anything about AKS or Kubernetes in general because that's just not something they've ever heard of or they've ever really had to interact with. If you're a technologist who works with that every day, then yeah, great, you know what that is. The reality is like if you look back on the history, to your point, of the time that it took you to learn cloud, and now you know cloud and you know it
Don't know
fairly well,
cloud.
and you've
I
worked.
don't. No, let's not play this game. I do not know anything about cloud. I might know some parts of cloud, but like
Sure,
that's the thing. It's like you don't know anything. Like let's be real.
sure.
Like we know parts of everything. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah. No, no, you're totally right. You're totally right. To get back to the point of things that ChatGPT does well, or just LLMs in general do well, I had a customer tell me once, they were like, an LLM never gets tired.
Mm,
I was like, you're totally right. They don't get tired. I guess I never thought about it that way. That's anthropomorphizing it, but still, it doesn't get tired. It can coalesce lots of information from disparate sources and still come up with insights. After this conversation, I'm gonna go have some water. I'm gonna sit down for 15 minutes, and then I'm gonna jump back into my workday. Right? Just
mm-hmm.
talking makes me tired.
Yeah.
There is no concept of that
Yeah.
with AI, right? And so it has this innate ability to go and go and go and go and go without having to stop, right? Like it can do that. Is it perfect every time? No. But can it do it? Absolutely. And so when we think about these concepts, right, like we don't know things to the fullest extent. It's not possible. It's not possible to
Yeah.
know all of cloud. You and I can say we know enough about AWS and Azure and GCP to be fluent, we'll say. I will never be fluent in all of those,
No.
in my opinion. I think I'm going to be okay at, gathering that information. I think that's an area where we can kind of distinguish, like it's able to take in crazy amounts of information, but it doesn't know that
Yeah.
information. It can provide me with that information, but it doesn't know that information. Same kind of concept, right? Like we're never going to know everything. We're never going to be able to crunch numbers or crunch data or pull from the internet the same way that these systems can, which is absolutely impressive.
Yeah. I mean, I will push back a little bit on your point about they don't get tired. Like if you have like a long running like chat, it starts to get really weird. So
Yeah.
like I
Yep.
will just create a new chat, and then things like it's crazy, and I think it's just because of the amount of like context it has to carry in between like conversations. But there are sometimes like I've asked it a question, and then it gives me some response, and then I'll continue the conversation, and then I'll ask a similar question, and then it'll give me almost the very same response as it saw way up higher, because it's trying to parse all this context, and it says, oh, it looks like I know what this is. Also, I think these things are very guilty of like similar to human beings, not to anthropomorphize. Like we only read like the first three sentences of a request.
Yeah.
Like I've seen this where it's like, why didn't you do the last thing I asked it to do? Where's this thing? It's like, oh, I'm so sorry. Here's this, blah blah blah. So I mean, it is like there are a ton of things that I can see like being very valuable. Like, if I want to be able to, write me a bash script that moves data from one place to another, and then it adds metadata to it, does all these things, right? I don't know all of the steps to do that, but I can create something. And then maybe I have a little bit of skill set where I can review it to make sure it works, right? Um, but I do think that these are tools, right? And I think
Yep.
it's okay to not use a tool sometimes. Like not everything is what's the phrase? Everything's not a nail, right?
Yep.
So I think that's like the area of that I'm getting into right now. It's like, all right, have this thing do like the one thing that I need to do, and then I've started to kind of detox from AI a little bit, and it's hard. Like I don't know if
Yeah.
you've tried this where it's like, you know, you turn it off and you're starting to actually like having to code or do something that you would have done like 5 years ago, and it's kind of painful because we're already started, we have this disposition to like just okay hit the button. So I mean it is fascinating how like we're very quickly like being somewhat dependent on it,
Yeah.
and that kind of scares me as somebody that is like takes a little bit of pride in what I do. It's like eventually like I don't need to do anything.
Yeah, yeah. Meeting notes are the ones that I get in trouble with. Like, I can use a note taker to take the meeting notes, and then sometimes I look back, like in meetings where I didn't have a note taker, and I'm like, these notes are crap. Like, what was I thinking when I was writing these notes?
Yeah. No, I have a very spicy take that it's like if you read the summarization of a meeting, you shouldn't be in the meeting in the first place.
Bingo. It's a good point.
Like, I mean, I've seen this time and time again where we're all guilty of it. There's 20 people in a meeting, one person is talking, everybody is looking at something else. So one person is kind of just talking, And then everybody looks at the summarization of whatever. Maybe two or three people chime up during the meeting, but for the most part, people just uh, they just read the summarization. And then you'll see an email or a Slack thread, and it's like, hey, looking at the meeting notes, and it's like, why didn't you just listen for the last half hour?
Yeah.
And I think that's a bigger problem than AI. That's like a we're expected to be working like three different contexts at the same time to be successful.
Yep.
Um, but I do think it's fascinating that there are a couple of things that AI just inserted itself into, and like people thought it was a good thing when it's not a good thing at all. It's like from a work perspective.
Yeah, totally. Actually, it's funny. Uh, I had someone I worked with at Microsoft that when Teams started to introduce like the automated summaries for Teams meetings, and it would have like the video playback, the summary, the transcript, and then it had that view underneath the video where it would pop up like who was speaking at a time.
Yeah.
This person would just cut people out of meetings if they didn't speak at least once during those meetings because they were like, clearly you either don't want to be here or don't need to be here because you're not
Interesting.
contributing. And it
Interesting.
was ruthless.
I
Like it
mean,
was ruthless, but I kind of was into it. I'm like, you're right. Maybe this person doesn't need to be here, or we need to start figuring out like, why did we have this meeting? Does everyone need to contribute? Is there a better way for us to have this interaction? Like, what could we be doing better rather than having 6 hours of your day be in meetings of which you contribute to maybe one?
we've all been in like the 10,000 person meeting, $10,000 meeting, right? Where like
Yeah, yeah.
literally you take the hourly wage of every person that's in there and you add it all up for an hour and it's like thousands of dollars, right? Like
Yep.
there's something to say about, and this is what I miss about, and this is like one of the only things I miss about like being in the office is like you can't fit 70 people into a conference room.
Yep.
So it's only like the 10 people that need to be there. And then the rest, like, people just find out via emails or whatever, right? And I think that these tools, Teams, Slack, Google Meet, whatever, right? They do a great thing, but also like there's it's too much accessibility. So literally anybody can hop on a Teams call, whether you want to be on there or you need to be there or not. And I think one of the things that I'm learning quickly as I get older is like I only can do one thing at one time
Yep.
successfully. If I try to do more than one thing, I'm just gonna do two things awfully,
Yep.
right? So I've been very very cognizant of like actually clicking no when people send me meeting invites, and that turns into a very interesting conversation because people aren't used to that. Um, but I think it goes back to like I'm recognizing in myself like I can't be in this meeting because I gotta write this thing.
Yeah.
I can't talk to you on Slack right now because I got a meeting in 10 minutes. I'm trying not to multitask because I've realized that I suck at multitasking.
100%. Yeah, I think there's also, the anxiety of it. Like I used to be so anxious when someone would send me a message and I'm like, I need to respond right then and there. I worked with a guy at Microsoft who would purposefully not respond for 24 hours. And it used to make me
Mm,
insane because I'm like, I
no.
need something from you right now. And I was like, maybe that's a bit extreme, but there is something to be said for it's okay to not answer stuff
No,
instantaneously.
no,
It's
no,
okay
no.
to
I
focus. It's
disagree.
okay to
No.
spend time.
So I will say
You
sure.
disagree? Okay, okay,
I'll
okay.
say sure, but you can't leave me on red. Like you can't leave me on red. If you leave me on red, I'm gonna spiral. Like there is
That's
literally
fair.
there's
That's
literally
fair.
nothing that you can do to like trigger me than read my message and not respond within an hour. Right?
That's fair.
I mean, look, and I know somebody who literally would go in and right click and say mark is unread after they read stuff because they know that like the stress that it puts on people.
Sure.
Um because at the end of the like this and this is my entitlement as a millennial, right? I'm expecting immediate return on my investment. I invest time by typing you a message and I expect a return on that. um I'm also very guilty of basically like if somebody like responds to hi, I'll say try again, like in the chat. And that's very like aggressive, but like I'm very much of the mindset where be purposeful with like your communication, or else we'll run to the situation where we're just wasting everybody's time.
Were you a no hello guy at Microsoft?
I mean, so I always start like I have like a canned thing. Like when I send somebody a message like that I've never met or I haven't talked to in a long time, it's very structured. Hello, hope you're doing well. My name is Isaac, and I like they get like four sentences from me.
Yeah.
They get the hello because that's required in civilized society, whatever. They get my name, they get what I do, they get how I found them, and I get what I need. And that's what they get from me in their first message every time. And some people like that. Some people don't. Let's just say that.
I honestly don't know what there is to not like about that because
I
I
think it's
also
because
get upset when
it's a
people
bit
say
aggressive.
hello.
It is kind of aggressive. Like instead like cuz some people need a bit of a warming up period, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I don't know. I'm not like that, but I could appreciate and I have empathy for people that are like, "Oh, that's a lot." Like cuz there's anxiety like if you get a message from somebody you don't know and it's like this big. For
That's fair.
people that aren't watching, I just made a very large distance with my fingers. Like it there's some anxiety like if you see that and you don't even read the text but there's a lot there, you're like, "Oh no, what's this?" There is anxiety.
Yeah.
Um but I do think that we can do a bit better than hi.
Yeah. Yeah. Even a small warm up, even with a hi, how's it going? I'm Isaac. I do this. Even if you didn't get into the immediate ask, I can understand the anxiety with that. I actually feel more anxiety when people just say hi or when people try and warm me up. I'm like, can we just get to whatever the thing is that you need?
Yeah.
Because I know you need something, right?
Yeah, right. No one ever messaged you to say hello, right?
Right,
Yeah.
right. Like cut to the chase.
Even to the effect that like I have occasionally like if I haven't talked to somebody in a while, like I'll reach out, just check in and say how they're doing. Like some people are very affronted by that. They're like, "Oh, okay. Like you're checking on me as a human? Like not like I'm not like a request factory, a response factory." All right. That's cool. I'm doing good. Kids are good. I'm busy. Like it's funny cuz like all we've lost like a lot of social interaction obviously in the last 7 years or whatever. But it is very funny to me how some people just can't do like very like light conversation whether it's in person, on the phone, on a Teams call, over chat. Like some people are just very like everybody's very direct now, which
Yeah.
I don't hate because I'm a pretty direct person, but there's no nuance anymore. It's like give me what I want or I'm gonna turn into like a little tantrum.
Some people like long walks on the beach, some people like small talk, and I guess you got to be able to work with both.
I don't know. I don't know. I've not met one person that likes both. That's for sure.
You and me both. Yeah,
Yeah.
not meeting.
Sydney, this conversation has been great. Like it was good to catch up with you. We didn't even tell the story of how we know each other, but let's just say that we were put into a room with a bunch of people and told to do something, and hijinks
Yep.
ensued. Um, no, it's been really good to catch up with you and see what you've been doing and get a little bit about your history because I didn't really know much about you. But also just to kind of learn how you think. And I think it's like I think I told you this when I met you a long time ago that you and like I thought you and I think very similarly. Um, and it's good to see that you haven't changed because I definitely haven't changed, right? And so it's good to see there's still some weirdos like me out there. Not to say that you're a
Abs-
weirdo, but it's weirdos adjacent to me. And for anybody that might be curious about what Sydnee's doing or the work that she's doing at Cribl, you can find her on LinkedIn. Sydnee Mayers is the best way. Um, and I've had a pleasure chatting with you. And before we sign off, do you have any last words? I know I've been ranting for like the last 20 minutes of this thing, but you have any parting words or things you'd like to end the show with?
Yeah. Thanks again for the invite. It was good catching up. And to your point, hijinks is definitely the way to describe
Yeah, yeah.
how we met at work. If I had one piece of advice to give people, I think it's totally cool to be into AI. I'm a huge fan of experimenting and trying new technologies, even as a technologist. It doesn't mean we should lose our ability to make judgment.
Mm,
And if something feels off to you, it probably is. So trust that gut feeling. If you feel like something is off, probably off. And it's okay. It's a step away, to disconnect, to take a moment, to your point on the email, step away for an hour and see how you feel. I think we need a bit more of that. And I know it sometimes gets said, but here it is again. It's okay if something feels off to step away, disconnect. You don't have to feel like everything needs to be done with AI, everything needs to be done with a tool. It's okay to write on pen and paper. It's okay to try in the analog way, for lack of a better term. Tools are great for helping us, but it's also okay not to use them.
I can't agree more. Just to go, like, we think very similarly. That's just the best way to phrase that. Again, Sydney, it was great to catch up with you. And I hope you get to enjoy the rest of your day. And I hope the people that were watching this live and the people listening to this in the future, hi future. This has been a great conversation, and thank you so much. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And my name is Isaac Levin. This has been Coffee and Open Source. For my friend Sydney, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.
See you later.